The clerk will please take roll.
All will be noted.
Thank you. At this time, our police department's new honor guard will present the colors. Do we stand up?
Do we rise? As soon as it comes in the door, yeah. Nice. Ready, rotate. Ready, hold. Release and arms. City of White Bear Lake, the flag of your nation, and the pledge of the United States. Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Opposed? Colors?
Nice addition. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the October 12th, 2021 meeting. Are there any corrections to the minutes?
Move to approve.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to 2B, minutes of the special city council meeting on October 20th, 2021. Any corrections?
Move approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Abstain.
Thank you. Approval of the agenda. Any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Move to approve, Madam Mayor.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have an agenda. Now, it's my distinct pleasure. We have visitors tonight. I'm going to call on Chief, sorry. I demoted you. I was looking at the captain when I said it.
It's quite all right.
Chief Swanson to do the swearing in of police officers. This is always a very special evening, and we on the council are very grateful that you have stepped forward to become officers in our department. So, Chief, please.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council and Ms. Heinecker. And also thank you to our honor guard. So I know for some of you that was a surprise, but we started an honor guard in the police department about a year and a half ago. COVID kind of took its toll on that as well as the rest of the world, but we wanted to make that a new tradition that with our new swearing-ins, we will now have our honor guard present the colors at future meetings. So we have 4 members on our honor guard and are hoping to continue to expand that. So many agencies have it, we just started it, and it's a great tradition to have. So on to the business that we're here for tonight. We've had a very busy summer and fall, as you know, with our hiring. We welcomed a new officer a few months ago. He's completed training, he's on his own, and now he's a veteran officer. So with the retirement, who happens to be in the audience, and some movement with 2 going to Ramsey County Sheriff's Department, we've hired 3 new officers this fall. So tonight we welcome these 3 new officers and their families to celebrate the start of their your White Bear Lake career. So I want to introduce you to our newest officers as we normally do, and we have a room full of people here tonight for them. So each of them have have ties to the city of White Bear Lake, and we are excited to welcome them to the next chapter and hopefully the last chapter of their career, or at least that they'll be staying here. So first up, we have Officer Eddie Yabi. And Eddie and his family are here. And Eddie has grown up running the city hall, or the halls of City Hall, for most of his life, as his mom has worked here for many years. He started school at Mankato State until he decided to enter the military. Eddie served in the U.S. Army for 4 years and held several different titles and ranks, and had deployments to both South Korea and Poland. One of Eddie's most proud military moments of his career is that he earned the coveted Expert Infantryman badge in 2016, so very impressive. Following his departure from the military, he started college at Century College, which is where I ultimately met him. I knew that his mom had all these great kids, but I had never had the pleasure of meeting Eddie. But he quickly stood out in class because he was always 5 chapters ahead. Sometimes he was ahead of the teacher in the class and was always working very ahead. So he was an exceptional student, which is what got noticed, or why I noticed him. So while he was in college, Eddie worked as a security guard for M Health Fairview, and he started as a community service officer in a police reserve with the city of White Bear Lake in January of 2020, and then continued to work in that role until graduating and becoming a police officer. So again, he's a familiar face around our city hall and police department, and it's been a well-deserved transition into police officer. So the things that stand out about Eddie is his willingness to help out, his brutal honesty, and the importance of being a role model for his younger siblings. I mentioned as he was sitting here, I mentioned to his aunt and uncle, he's a really honest person. Like, he shares a lot of information that sometimes I warn him his mom works next door and you got to watch what you're saying because she might hear about it from one of us. We knew all about the plans for his proposal before he proposed, so more to that later. Next we have Officer Luke Dolman, and the first time that I met Luke was when he walked into the lobby of the police department. His family is here. I'm sure he was 18 at the time. He didn't really look 18 at the time, but he walked in to drop off his reserve application, and although he was very, very young, he made quite an impression because rather than just dropping the application off and running, he stuck around to introduce himself, talk about his desire to become a police reserve, and how badly he wanted it. It was very obvious to myself and Captain Henry when we met with him at the time. I don't know if he remembers that, but it has stood out to me all these years because I don't know that anybody else has ever done that. So Luke volunteered for the next 3 years as a police reserve and worked more than 1,880 hours as a reserve. In one of the years, he worked 1,040 volunteer hours alone, which he was a community service officer at that same time. So we were paying him about half the cost of the time that he was spending here. So while volunteering as a reserve, Luke was also hired on as the part-time community service officer, like I said, and he continued to work here and attend college at Century College and then later Metro State University. So despite being young or very busy with school, work, and volunteering at a young age at White Bear Lake, Luke continued to remain active with the Ramsey County Sheriff's Department Explorers Unit and has served as an advisor for the past year, something that he's hoping to continue to maintain, which we support greatly because they're a partner agency and we don't have an Explorer unit, so it's great to have one of our people helping them. So as you can tell, law enforcement and serving the community has been front and center for Luke for most of his adult life, and he attributes this drive to the many mentors he's had along the way, specifically his aunt, uncle, and cousin who are also in law enforcement. And ironically, his aunt is also one of my mentors in law enforcement because she was a police chief and went on to much bigger things, so she's been a good mentor to him and me. Because he couldn't wait to become a police officer and White Bear Lake wasn't hiring at the time, he decided to put his talents to use and became a Chisago County Sheriff's Deputy in December of 2019. And although he enjoyed his time at Chisago County and gathered even more experience, his heart remained at White Bear Lake. And when we started another process, he decided to apply, which is how we got here today. If you talk with Luke, he will share very positive feedback about his time serving in Chisago County, and his role in their community was something much different than what he was used to growing up in the suburbs of Ramsey County, because he served in Rush City, but it provided him with a rural perspective of policing. So we're happy that Luke has come home to White Bear Lake. And then last but not least, in our second row, we have Officer Jerome Carey, who also has ties to White Bear. So like the previous two, he started his law enforcement career in our police reserve unit in White Bear Lake. I do remember serving alongside of him at Manitou Days parades and Market Fest. So one thing that has influenced Jerome in his decision to pursue the path he has were the events of 9/11. She's a little bit older than Luke in front of him because he's old enough to remember the day and the impact of the role that police and fire served during the events that day. No doubt all of this has stuck with him, which is what brought him into law enforcement. And although he has encountered some challenges along the way, he's worked very hard to get where he is today. Upon graduating from high school in Cottage Grove, Jerome decided to pursue an education in law enforcement at Inver Hills Community College. And at the time Jerome graduated from college, it was much more difficult to get into the career of law enforcement and become a police officer. So in an effort to boost his resume, he applied here at White Bear Lake as a police reserve in 2014, and then he served in our police reserve unit for the next 2 years. So while volunteering for the police reserves, he also worked as a corrections officer for Oak Park Heights Prison, which, as you can imagine, was very valuable experience for him. And his efforts paid off, and he was ultimately hired by the Minneapolis Police Department in 2016. Jerome speaks highly of his the opportunity to serve the residents of Minneapolis and is very appreciative for being able to start his career there. And however, like the others here tonight, Jerome felt it was time to return to where he started. And while the majority of his experiences in Minneapolis for the past 5 years have been positive, he's ready to make White Bear Lake Police Department his home. So we welcome him as well. So as I said earlier, we are excited to welcome all 3 new officers, and the thing that stands out about these 3 is their desire to serve our community and their dedication to the profession. They each came to us with a different story, but all bring vast experience and determination to represent the city well, and they each selected White Bear Lake for the right reasons. I want to note the smiles on each of their faces because this is something that I see from each of them every day as they walk through those doors to start their day. And they're very excited to be here, and we're very excited to have them. So with that, we're going to move on to the oath of office. And I'll just note that Eddie is going to have his wife, Nicole, pin his badge on. She's really ready for this. Eddie wanted me to embarrass her somehow, which we're not going to do. That just tells you a little bit about his personality. And then Luke is going to have his grandfather, Lou, come up and pin his badge on, and Jerome is going to have his fiancée, Morgan, pin his badge on. So we'll have the 3 of you come up with those that are pinning your badge on, and then Kara will issue the oath of office or deliver the oath of office, and family should feel free to take pictures.
Yeah, just
Stand in front of me, Dale.
yeah.
Please, no, seriously, stand in front of me.
No, go ahead.
So you need to say your name separately, okay?
Yes.
All right. So if you'll raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name,
Jerome Carey. Luke Dolman. Edward Yabby.
do solemnly swear
Do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the state of Minnesota,
and the state of Minnesota,
and will discharge and faithfully execute
and will discharge and faithfully execute
the duties devolving upon me
the duties devolving upon me
as police officer for the city of White Bear Lake
as a police officer for the city of White Bear Lake,
without fear or favor,
without fear or favor,
to the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So you can all 3 come up at once and pin their badge on, which is not an easy task, right?
Always the hard one.
If you poke them, it's fine. They probably told you it wasn't fine, but it's fine. They need to be tough.
That is ultimate.
So what year did you graduate college? My kids are all cottage graduates. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Earlier.
Congratulations. Yeah, no kidding.
Faith in human nature.
Yeah, it does.
Well, again, thank you for having us, Mayor, members of the council. With that, we're going to go. So
This will be the last one I'll witness as mayor.
you think it will be? I don't expect that we're going to have any more this year.
I don't think you will either, and it's been a delight and a pleasure, and I thank all of you that are currently serving and our newest officers, and I wish you all Godspeed.
Thank you.
Go and have fun now. Thank you. You want some? Be my guest. Oh, that's okay. We're fine.
Experience with Oak Park Heights, I think, is.
What a
I know
nice-
I got a lot of experience working in the jail before working the streets. I mean, you learn that they're people who made mistakes.
Grandfather,
Yeah.
wasn't that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yes, it was wonderful.
Oh, yeah, it was really sweet. It is.
That's great.
That was sweet that he had his grandfather.
That's very nice.
You know, dude.
Still working on the badge.
No, I'm next.
That really tall, beautiful woman, when you see it, that's Jean's daughter.
Which tall one?
Here's that.
Oh, the, with the stripe? Oh, really?
And she moved up north.
She's, oh my. Yeah.
She was.
I like tall women that aren't afraid to wear high heels. You know, she's got on,
She's so,
it's one that I'm wearing.
Recognize the name, but not.
No problem.
that's really she's gonna get her.
Oh, okay.
How's life down in her?
How are you?
Just got back from vacation.
Oh, well, that was nice. Where'd you go, Winnie? Nice.
First international.
Yeah.
This is a makeup trip from April 2020.
Oh, well, there you
We
go.
had to take it at some point.
Yeah.
Was the weather nice?
It rained a little bit, but it was 86 every day, so it's hard to complain about that.
Nice, beautiful. Although we had such a warm summer, you probably didn't feel like there was much.
I passed it on to, we have
That
someone
was
helping us,
nice to get away.
just because we're at that part of the process.
A little depressing to see the item on the agenda,
I may have
though.
to follow up. There was something I didn't make sense, but I didn't.
Oh, yeah, we did that while you were gone.
Interviews, I know, here.
It was, yeah, God, was
really
that,
nice.
was that only a week
It was
ago?
only last
I was
Wednesday.
exhausted when we got
I know
home.
it.
Well, you'd been here all day.
But I didn't have to interview, I just,
Mark Dayton's attorneys in my office, worked with her for like 18 months.
Yeah. Tonka Bay.
Taka Bay?
Yeah. Had very good things.
Oh, good.
She's
Good.
very,
Partial, that makes sense.
very detailed.
I don't think anybody's gonna run over very easily, I think.
Yeah, she's strong.
Yeah, well, Minnesota.
It's nice. Well, that reaffirms our good decision then. All right, so, are you gonna, or is Ann's gonna? All right. Oh, Kara's still. All right, Ann, you're up next here with the ACE study. You
Yes,
wanna-
thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. The next visitor on our agenda this evening is Rita Trapp with the firm of HKGI, who helped navigate a partner plan for a small area known as the Arts, Culture, and Education Plan, or Area Plan, that the city kind of led the way, but with partnership with the Whitebear Center for the Arts, Lakeshore Players Theater, Children's Performing Arts, School District 624, and Ramsey County as part of both the Boost-Bento Trail Extension as well as the Rush Line. Rita is here this evening. She was able to corral us all to come up with some common values and potential strategies to help really distinguish this really kind of a gem that complements our community and really adds an interesting facet that most communities don't have, even if they do have a historic downtown. Thank you. Would you like me to repeat any of that?
Now she's just going to throw it over to me and it'll be done.
So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Rita Trapp with HKGI to walk you through the Arts, Culture, and Education Area Plan.
All right, the slides. Woohoo! Awesome. Well, it's a pleasure to be here this evening. I think many of you we met earlier on in the process, and I'm happy to present the findings and what we worked with all of the partners. Just a second, I'm running it so I can see it, and you have the slides. It was mentioned what the study partners and the number of agencies that were involved. So the different arts organizations, yourselves, the school district, and Ramsey County. The common values, if on the next slide, there are a number of common values that were pulled together through the conversations. I will talk about the schedule in a moment. And it's a lot of text, and we're hoping that you go back and have a chance to really look at all of the slides in detail, but I'm kind of providing that overview of what happened, where we went, some of the strategies that we identified. But there are a lot of common values that were important to all of the organizations, partly being welcoming and diverse and equity, really looking at communication, looking at how this fits in with the whole community, how it fits in with downtown, and really trying to celebrate the art in all its different facets, both physically as well as through performance. So there's a number of different values that we used as we looked at the different areas. If we look at the site analysis and opportunities, which is where we began, making sure we all came together with a common understanding of what's been discussed, what we're looking for in the future, we started by trying to understand what was already planned. So obviously the future expansion of the high school, the city-owned wetland area, the future site expansions for White Bear Center for the Art and Hannahville, the future station for Rush Line, and the Bruce Vento Trail. As we considered this area and we looked at the priority considerations, the priority considerations included the connection to downtown. I think we all know that although the Arts District is physically separated by a few blocks, it really is integral and needs to be connected to the downtown area. We also really focused and talked about the fact that connecting the partner agencies or the campuses is important. Right now, the way that it was being planned, there was a little bit more isolation as everybody kind of worked on their own plans, and I think the conversation really helped the idea that while they did want to have joint audiences and students moving back and forth, that really wasn't something that had been fully thought through as everybody worked on their individual plans. And then looking at the connections to the adjacent residential neighborhoods, that it's not in isolation, and while we are looking at an area that's really attractive to the broader White Bear Lake community and beyond, it's also important that we're connecting to the residential neighborhoods and that they're really an asset to them. So those are some of the opportunities that were looked at. When we looked at vehicle circulation, there was a little bit more on the issues side when we looked at that. So concern about the parking congestion or just the general traffic congestion that happens with a high school campus. Also, when you have theater performances, where does everybody leave? All throughout the same exit, trying to get onto Highway 61. Also looking at the potential roadway modifications on 7th and 8th related to the Rush Line. And just the idea of shared parking, that conversation had been started between a few of the organizations, but making sure that those conversations continued. So when we met, our first part of the process is to have those conversations, understand the issues, understand kind of the vision for each organization, and then we moved forward to identifying strategies. The strategies we grouped into 4 areas: network and circulation, so the idea of what are the physical improvements to allow vehicular and pedestrian movement through the area. Placemaking, the idea that you know you're in the Arts District or you know you're in White Bear. The idea of land use and redevelopment, so what are the things the city can do to help support redevelopment or intensification of uses, and then just the overall organizational framework. What is the framework that could support an enhancement and further partnership and collaboration amongst the agency partners? So I'm going to high level talk about each of the strategies, starting with network and circulation. One of the elements that really goes into what I talked about of connecting between the campuses and the residential neighborhood is really improving the east-west connections for pedestrians. As you can see, that's focused both on the high school campus area as well as through the individual arts organizations connections. So it's something that we need to look at on an east-west basis. Throughout the presentation, you'll notice some precedent photos, generally in the bottom right. Those are trying to give examples of where other communities have done that and what that might look like. And it's just kind of an inspiration to make sure that we kind of can understand what we're talking about. If we look at traffic calming, so the idea of there are strategies we can use on the north-south streets, so Division and Bald Eagle, to really make it feel that traffic isn't moving quite as fast, to make it feel like people can move through the area. And so the idea, and because we're doing something that is in the arts district, using artistic elements instead of just traditional traffic calming elements. So the idea of the colorful, artistic, creative pavement markings, creating areas for visual installation. So it's another way to do what we have done in other areas maybe of the community, but do it in a slightly different way that helps create that sense of place. We also looked at improving the roadway circulation to provide more space for pedestrians on Long Avenue. That's something that obviously will take a little bit more conversation between Ramsey County and the city, but really that's an opportunity, and there will be improvements at some point in the future, so really taking into consideration pedestrian movement to try and provide that connectivity. And then really recognizing that rather than just having traditional pedestrian crossings, that there are opportunities to make it more visible across Division as we try and connect the campuses. That also could provide an opportunity if you were ever going to have an event that crossed all of the campuses, that you kind of have that focal point of where you could focus. If you were going to close part of the street just for an afternoon and people could be moving back and forth, it kind of gives that sense of where this all occurs. So those are some ideas for things to help improve movement. And then the last one is addressing pedestrian connectivity on both sides of Highway 61. We did do a presentation as part of this series of presentations. I did present to the arts organizations, similar slides, similar presentations, and one of the comments that they had that Highway 61 is one of the things they're probably the most concerned about. Our study didn't focus on solving that problem. That was probably beyond the scope of what I can do with all of the other agencies and jurisdictions involved. But we do have in this study the idea of really trying to improve those pedestrian connections on both sides so that people understand if they're in downtown how you move up to the arts district, or if you're in the arts district, how do you maybe park there and go down and eat and come back. And so you can see the blue areas are kind of the primary pedestrian routes, and the green are opportunities to really address those issues. So if we move on to mine skipped over that. Develop a wayfinding plan. That is the idea of both on the pedestrian scale and the vehicular scale, that we make sure that we direct people in the right area. Also use that in a way that reflects the arts district itself. And then also using potentially landmarks like the Rush Line station or the depot, or things that people can visually see to kind of help make that connection. All right, placemaking. One element of placemaking is to really look at activating as much as we can the parking lot, the streets, other in-between spaces for events or gathering. One of the things that we typically do right now is, you create a parking lot and there is some leftover space that could be created a little bit more thoughtfully for events, or the idea of using the visual connections so that helps people understand the fact that they're moving towards the art districts or towards downtown. And we have some examples of what that could look like. As we do that, if you move into that area, one of the things that needs to be thought about is how do you support events or pop-up events. So things like Wi-Fi, outlets, those types of elements also need to be thought about. It's helpful to have the spaces kind of identified, but also supportive elements that help that work. Then the next element is enhancing the streetscape. So things like pedestrian lighting, pavement, surfaces, seating and gathering, landscaping, those elements that we traditionally talk about as streetscape. And again, the idea of doing them related to the arts or something that partners with the arts organization in order to make that connection. We do have an example of how a streetscape could be transformed to support events. This example, we just used Long Avenue as an example, but the idea of having something that's really visual, that you can see that there's a sidewalk moving through the location, that you could have events that could happen on the street, that you're not doing maybe the curb in the same way, you're doing something that works, and it was really flexible to have events in the area. The next action or strategy that we talked about is the idea of creating public access to the wetland area. It is located just north of the White Bear Center for the Arts, so there is an opportunity to actually transform it for use. I don't think we thought about transforming it significantly to an active space, but more of a passive space. It would be an opportunity to have artists design the space or students involved with designing the space, but also a place for people to go out and use as inspiration for their arts. One element that we found as we reviewed precedent of arts districts in other places throughout the country is the idea that there is some type of district branding effort that happens, some way that you know that it's a cohesive district. So these are some examples, and there's different ways of doing it. Obviously, it could be partner or organization-led. It could be something that you have through artist or student design. But this is something that can be used throughout different mediums and could be a strategy to help really elevate the recognition of this area as an arts district. And similarly, another strategy to help really focus on placemaking is the idea of an artist in residence program. I know the White Bear Center for the Arts has used artists in residence for other strategies, but one way to do it is to use it for placemaking. So how can they recommend or build relationships with downtown or the school district, ways of incorporating things that are visible in the streetscape in the public realm as opposed to things that might be just inside the arts organizations. So this is some things that have happened in other places in the country, and as a way to help build the momentum for an arts district when one is getting created. Now we're moving on to land use and redevelopment, and as a planner, this is a section off, after my own heart, so I won't belabor it too long. I'll try not to spend too much time on it. But for land use, when we looked at the land use part of it, there's been a lot of transformation in this neighborhood already. So we were trying to find strategies that help to provide flexibility, help to provide more opportunity for property owners to use their sites as opposed to targeting significant redevelopment or trying to transform it significantly farther. So a lot of these strategies are a little bit more behind the scenes, things that the city could do to help provide that. One opportunity is to create an overlay district that allows more flexibility. So there are things that we could do to, for example, lowering setback limitations, exploring accessory dwelling units or artist in residency housing and applying it in a different way than you do in the rest of the city, modifying home occupation requirements. So again, artists are more supported if they want to live in this area. And then also looking at any development or redevelopment being required to include semi-public gathering spaces, artists, public art, replacement of affordable housing units. So one strategy to really support this area and its continued evolution is to look at an overlay district. We suggested that rather than a specific zoning district, because there are unique features within the neighborhood that it may not make sense to do one specific zoning district. Also, there are opportunities for adaptive reuse. Some of the former commercial spaces that are on the edges, depending upon what the property owners are interested in, could be great spaces for artists. There also is something called an accessory commercial unit that is trending in the country, and that's the idea of, instead of an accessory dwelling unit, is the idea that you have a commercial space, a small commercial space that's right next to or part of a home, and it provides kind of that live-work idea without having a multi-use building. It's just a house that has an accessory commercial space, and you can see some examples in the photos where it's kind of that transformation, and I know you have some areas in the community where there is that conversion between residential and commercial.
And then also the idea of, can existing housing be live work or have retail, studio, gallery spaces? So that's taking a look at how the zoning is applied and making some changes to it. And then there is also some precedents in the country for using something called arts easement. So areas where you have more significant front yard setbacks, or sometimes the street yard setback on a corner lot. Sometimes they're bigger in certain houses, and some places have allowed something called an arts easement, where you're able to use that to activate the public realm, and it's similar to a typical easement where it defined how it can be used, but it's another way of using that setback area in a way that reinforces that you're in an arts district. So that's another example. There are a few examples in the country for that, so something else that could be thought of. And then developing tools to encourage mixed use and creative spaces. I think, as all of you know, it's complicated to work with a city, and artists are wonderful in what they do, but sometimes the expertise is not there to try and figure out how to work through our bureaucracy. And so there is probably more the city could do to make that part a little bit clearer, and to try and develop strategies that really help. And that's any city, obviously. We're all experts at what we're experts at, and it's hard when you're in a different realm. And so this is an area that the city could probably enhance and provide more information and a little bit more support as needed for zoning and permitting, because that's something that probably the intricacies aren't as well known. Then the last strategy is organization framework. This one is really more geared to how do we move beyond the study that had been concluded, and these were just some ideas and precedents that we had gathered about how did communities move from an idea to the actualization of an arts district. How did they get to be well known? Most of the precedents that we found really looked at some type of organization that was beyond the individual organizations and where they really worked cohesively together. That's helpful for the branding, that's helpful for the ongoing events, that's helpful for making sure that they are working together and kind of get the marketing. So that's an idea. I think that's not surprising, and it's always challenging to do, but that is one element that would further the arts district forward if there was an interest in that. Also, even if that organization wouldn't occur, there are opportunities to do more of social media and branding campaign to gather ideas for the district. We saw some precedents where arts organizations had a website that really was devoted to the potential attendees of events and then also the potential artists and ways to generate excitement and ideas and interest for people to be in the community. And then organizing one or more public events, and clearly the Arts District and the arts organizations are doing that. They had one this fall that was a collaboration, and they can continue to build on that. But we just had some other ideas, and I think continuing that on is important if the Arts District is going to be looked at as a kind of a cohesive area. And also partnering with the school as it makes sense to kind of broaden the understanding beyond just this area to the larger region and community. And then the last part is connecting downtown business resources to this area. There may be opportunities or interest in kind of partnering a little bit more with storefront windows or blank or vacant spaces. There are places where they try and make those connections, and so the artists are instrumental in transforming a bit what those retail spaces would look like or what those storefront displays would look like. And that actually links back to that artist in residence idea of having someone that can kind of help frame that program and work through those partnerships. But that's another idea of what we saw as we looked at precedents across the country. And then funding and partnership opportunities. There are arts opportunities. We did do a brief research on our database of funding opportunities. But the challenge is you have to have a project and you kind of have to know what you're looking for to figure out what the opportunities are. But obviously there are opportunities throughout the country, and so there may be funding and partnership opportunities. Generally, we found that's a little bit easier when there's an organization or a clear organization that's the leader in that. But it is something that is a possibility if, as this moves forward in its evolution. And then we also talked about creating sub-districts. Okay, that's my land use hat again, sorry. Sub-districts. But But the idea of, right now, if we look at the comprehensive plan, the downtown kind of has two sides, the east and the west side, and so is there a value in branding? Is it the whole arts district? Do we talk about downtown as the whole area, and then we kind of have sub-areas? I think we struggled a little bit with the idea that this was totally a separate, because we really want to build that collaboration and that energy between, and so how do we do that? So we just had some suggestions of how do we describe that. So something to think about, and it doesn't necessarily need to be the zoning side. That's for us to figure out separately, but that's something to think about. So next steps, to kind of circle all the way back, when the study was started, it was really undertaken to facilitate the conversation. There wasn't a specific end goal, there wasn't a specific report or plan. It was we needed to bring the organizations together, see what ideas were out there, see what would work, what is specific to the area. As I said, the discussions found a lot of common values. I think there were some things that are already early kind of wins that happened through that collaboration, and that can continue. Beyond these, there haven't been specific steps identified. We do have some possible steps that are listed. You know, there could be more collaboration on special events, sharing ideas in upcoming planning efforts. So hopefully this study and the strategies would be something that would be used as the foundation when the rush line stationary planning would happen, or if there was a downtown mobility study. Small area master plan is a possibility if we wanted to elevate it to the next level and adopt an actual plan that would identify strategies, be more specific on land use and implementation and how the city could move forward, and then obviously exploring some of those zoning changes. We had identified the value of having a neighborhood meeting, so there is a neighborhood meeting scheduled for Monday. And the intention of that, there was a letter sent to the neighborhood to let them know about the neighborhood meeting. It will be open house format, so people will come in, be able to look at this information in kind of a board format. I will do a brief presentation to just orient folks. I find that's helpful, that people can kind of hear the overview and what we're doing there this evening. And then on Monday, November 8th, I'm scheduled to present to the White Bear Lake School Board. So the intention is that every partner has the opportunity to hear the same information and learn about what the results of the study, and then each organization kind of think about what their next steps might be relative to the study. So I know I speedily went through there. I was told 15 to 20 minutes, so hopefully you followed through.
Good job.
Hopefully it wasn't too fast, but I'm happy to go back and answer questions and provide more information.
Councilmember Bean.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is my ward. It looks very exciting.
Good.
I look forward to seeing how things continue to play out. As I was walking my ward these last 2 months, because I'm up for re-election, one of my constituents who lives in that area brought up the idea of a pedestrian bridge. And when you were speaking of contact with downtown, I was envisioning in my mind a bridge, that would be, artistic in nature. And I was that's something I would like to explore to see if there's any possibility, if it's one of, is it workable? Is there space for it? 2, is it affordable? And 3, would it be the right way to connect from the district to the downtown?
I hope that's something, not to add to the workload of the downtown mobility study, but it kind of feels like that would be something related to that. Sorry, Paul. Is that okay to say?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I think it's something that we heard from the arts organization that was something that was important, and I'm sure it was in conversation. Just because we were looking at more of how do we do the arts, that's a whole big discussion, and so we didn't encompass that in this study. But I certainly think it's valuable to have that conversation, because people don't always understand all of those things you brought up, so I was excited to see you say that, like the cost, and do we have the space, where do you touch down, and the grade change, and all of that. That's why we have engineers, because I'm just dangerous to say all of those things.
Well, I have to say one thing for those of us that were on the council when the Highway 61 project was done, and we came up with the Arts District flags. Little did we know it was going to turn into this, but it's quite exciting to see this moving forward. But we kind of hoped there was going to be this kind of a push somewhere along the way. But that was back in the infancy. That was before anything had been built over there. So, Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, as you outlined some opportunities and possibilities, and that's pretty much all they are at the moment, and that's good. That's.
Yep.
Do we have enough core, so I'm wrestling in my head, do we have enough core arts activity among the 2 facilities, 3 organizations that are there? Is that enough to call it a district by itself? Is it an extension, an outer ring of the downtown area? And from your experience with other communities, I'm not saying we want more, but if we were to pursue that, does that require more? Or do we have enough? Or how do we think about that kind of center of gravity and how we think about that?
So one element of arts districts is they, for a while, generally happen organically, kind of how you started, but there's probably some more organic evolution that needs to happen. I think from our experience, the city could probably do some things to provide more flexibility and more openness and start to kind of communicate that. It is a fairly small area. I don't think you have the supportive arts businesses and things, but that's going to have to naturally evolve in order for that to happen. I think we struggled with the idea of, does it make sense to call it its own thing? Does it need to be part of downtown? But some of that is a comfort level also with the downtown and how they think of themselves. And so we can't just, I think, impose something like that.
Right.
Our hope was, again, kind of that slide of, it'd be nice if we could think about it as a cohesive, because there is that synergy of arts back to the downtown, moving back and forth. But that's part of the conversation that probably needs to continue to happen. Most of the arts districts we looked at were as precedents. The ones that you well know are going to be, there's going to be more that's happening there, but they all had to start someplace. And so trying to do these little steps that we can see, and some of the things that we identified are things you can do, and some of the things you identified aren't things you can do. They're things that those organizations need to take upon themselves to do. So it is going to take each partner kind of doing what is within their realm to kind of move everything forward.
So where does the accountability for shepherding those conversations, where does that lie?
That is a challenging question, because it is something where I think you can support it. You can certainly be more of a leader, but there's always that balancing act that cities have of being too forceful and not doing what is deemed enough. And I think that's something you're going to have to figure out as we move forward and kind of check in. I think one thing we did talk about at the end as next steps is a more regular check-in to help with that accountability or that reminder of, we did this and what can we do and how do we move forward. I think right now I only presented to the arts organizations 3 weeks ago. I'd have to look. And that was the first time they had seen that, and they probably need more time than to understand and think about it. I think as a city, most of the things I presented are things that are either very familiar or somewhat familiar. You have a context with which to understand what I'm talking about and how you fit in. I think there's a little bit different on how they think about, well, what is it out of that we can do?
If I could continue with one more question, Madam Mayor.
Sure, please.
So you're making a presentation to us. You have presented to the arts organizations. You will be presenting to the school district. That's good. You interacted with the Downtown Association, the chamber. Kind of what's the nature of that part of the conversation and the exposure of those interests?
Yep. We haven't, that was not included as part of the study. I certainly think staff they are empowered, they know all this information as well as I can do, so they can move that forward, or those are conversations that we can be a part of as that outside party as well, because sometimes that's helpful in those conversations. I think those are conversations that probably need to happen. It's just the timing and how it works together, and there's a lot of layers of organizations, and you also have a lot of planning efforts that maybe are happening and for sure are happening, and trying to pull this all together in a way that works. So I think those are things that I would recommend to have those conversations.
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Jones.
Yeah, the aspect of who's hurting the cats. That's, and some cats are going to be faster, some cats are not. Some cats are going to be lazy, some cats are going to, and that's my biggest fear. I see this moving faster than the residents, the community would see the benefit of. I'm for this. I picture slices. I see the bean in Chicago. I see parts of Edina. I see parts of Grand Avenue. I like the idea of the zoning to give the residents that are there. They've got to have a huge say. I was glad to. That was one of my questions. I was glad to see you address that. So that the ability to make connection. I think the easy one is to the school campus. That's obviously easy. The tougher one is to. The goal would be to make the connection, not a division. But connecting 61, I'd say we could go under. I mean, I know it always sounds creepy, but it's half the cost and it's half the real estate, because you don't have to go as high to get the ADA compliant things. It's not creepy. We can paint flowers on it. And lastly, with an artisan residence program on it, I mean, would that person be able to go throughout the city, go out throughout our community, not only create art in this district, but elsewhere in our community? And one of the narrow things that I'd look at is, could they paint Green Bears white, for example, since our city can't get that done. But I'm serious about the.
Where are the green? I'm familiar with these green.
Go
bears.
up to 35E and 96 someday. But I'm serious about outside of this district too.
So the artists in residence can be whatever the organization who sponsors it makes it to be. It doesn't have to be just about the downtown. Now, if it's done by an organization that's specific for the arts district, I would anticipate that it would be more focused that, but it's certainly something that could be looked at broader. My hope would, one of our ideas had been the idea of they're there to kind of help with that connection to the downtown businesses and the retail, and could that work together, or doing the public art, those types of things.
Call it an aspect of wayfinding / marketing to,
Right.
It's a way to point back to.
Right. So one comment that I had, just because I had assumed, because I know bridges are really challenging and tunnels are also challenging, that might not be feasible. There's a lot of jurisdictions that have to be involved, and there's the money and all of that. So when we were thinking about the connection between the arts district, it's not great, I admit it.
Right,
Not
it is what it
great
is.
to go south on this side of 61. But that goes back to me in the placemaking and the streetscape, that there would be a way, if we were thoughtful and creative, to add elements so you knew you were going in the right direction. And you could cross the parking lot. I'm not saying it's ideal, and would I ever design it that way, but there are things we could probably do to help make that a actual path that feels like a connection. If that 61 bridge isn't possible, or it's so many years out, there are little things that could be done before then. If there's art along there and I'm making this up, half a block, I can see it. I must be still going in the right direction. There's signage, there's banners, there's art. Okay, this is how I'm going to get to the depot or downtown. There probably are strategies that we haven't thought about that could either be interim or could be permanent steps that enhance it as well. And we tried to talk about that. I don't know if they come out as strongly, but I think that's one thing. Maybe the mobility study, or kind of in combination, we think about is, if we can't do that, or we can't do it for a lot of years, there's probably things we could do to be better and to be clear that works.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A question for Mr. Coffey, maybe. Long, is it Long Avenue? Is that the name of
Is that our street?
County road.
That is county.
That's what I figured, because I drove it the other day and it's in rough shape.
Yeah,
They're waiting.
So, I mean, so it's when they do that, we got to work with them. Because I like some of these ideas. I mean, just when we redo the street or when they redo the street, there's a lot of creativity could go into that. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, we got to not let that opportunity go, but it's not our street, which I'm not surprised by because it is such a bad shape. You know?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Long Avenue is one roadway that Ramsey County would like to do a turn back on. Some of the issues that surround that is the right-of-way along the, if you really look at where the road is situated, a lot of the road is outside of the right-of-way within the railroad right-of-way.
Is it?
So there's some things that have to get fixed before we would.
The railroads are easy to work. No, I'm just-
Yeah, so we would want Ramsey County to work out some of those issues and figure that out before we just took it over. Otherwise, kind of,
Oh, yes.
it could become a big issue for the city if we just took it over as is. So that's why they've been doing minimal maintenance till we figure out what we're going to do.
County to make all of the repairs and make it look nice and pretty before they give it to us?
Or they give us the money, right?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, as far as what it looks like, that's really up to us and the county in a turnback agreement. Many roadways are turned back in a condition such as Councilmember Edberg describes, that it's done, it's complete. Other times we want more flexibility as far as to do what we want to do with it. Maybe put more money into it, so it might be better off under city control when we rebuild it. So in that case, oftentimes they will give the cash equivalent for us to do that work.
Okay. Well, you've given us lots to think about. But it's an exciting thing to think about.
And it's exciting to present it to all of you and have you hear it. So please,
Member Edberg.
So as you have shared these ideas with others and as they've been percolating along, where are the places where folks identify tensions or rubs or the hell no, we won't go? Where does that pop up? I mean, we're talking the multi-block area. It's relatively new in its conceptualization. It's a lot of it. We are not in a place where we have settled patterns of, and whatever we do have is likely to get unsettled for a while. What's that dynamic look like as you and colleagues and others involved have kind of put these balls up in the air?
well, we'll know more next week after the neighborhood meeting. We'll hear from the residents at that point and see what the concerns are. And we're designing that open house to really have an opportunity for people to write comments on the board, to put dots on things they like, to express concerns, because I think that's the most helpful. We don't want it to just be informative. We want to actually hear what the concerns, the questions are. When we presented to the arts organizations, I think some of it was just one of it was the crossing of Highway 61. There was a lot of discussion about that. There was some discussion and concern about just the change that was coming and whether or not how that would look and how that impacted their organization. So, for example, if there was changes to circulation or if there was changes to how movement would occur. I think there was still a lot of thinking that was happening when I presented, as I referenced. A lot of these ideas are new, and some of these ideas are maybe not things that they've thought about. And so I don't know that we have the clear answer yet, and I'm assuming there's more conversation that staff has with the organizations and their staff, and we'll probably continue to hear feedback from those conversations. But I don't have a lot yet because I think things are still percolating out there for everyone.
Thank you.
I was just going to add that we'd be happy to provide you copies of the PowerPoint, as well as just let you know a press release will be going out tomorrow, and we will be posting the PowerPoint on the city's website in advance of Monday's neighborhood meeting and the following week's school board presentation. So we are doing our best to get the word out to those in the community that this has been completed.
Good. Sounds like you have it covered then.
We hope.
All right, I guess we'll see what the next step's going to be. Thank
right?
you.
It was a pleasure to see you all this evening.
Thank you so much. All right, moving on to 5A, resolution certifying delinquent charges related to the municipal utility system assessment. Ms. Kinzada.
Yes, good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. This is our annual assessment of utility bills. Just as a review, the city bills residents on a quarterly basis, and then when a resident or property owner receives the bill, they have 35 days to make payment on their account. Each year, in September, we look back at bills that were due through June 30th, and if there are delinquent accounts that are more than 30 days old, we send notices to the property owners letting them know that if the balance that is delinquent isn't paid by November, when we can send our assessments in to the county, then that amount will be assessed to their property taxes for the next year. So we went through our review in September. I am excited to say that this is the lowest number of notices that we sent out to property owners in the last 5 or 6 years. Nice. And in response to those notices, just under half of the accounts that received the notices paid their amounts that were delinquent, and now they're at a current status. Through part of this process, when residents did call over this last year and a half, and they had issues paying their bill, or if there were any delinquent notices, the staff did refer them to Ramsey County to seek any available help through some of the federal funding that has been distributed. I know that this summer we referred quite a few people, and they were able to get assistance and pay their bill. The city will accept payments through November 19th. So of the outstanding items, if people have outstanding accounts, they can still make payments, and we'll get those included. We have the cutoff day on the 19th because there is a strong deadline by the county to when we have to turn our assessment rolls over. So with that, I'm asking for approval of the resolution to certify any delinquent utility bill accounts that have not been paid by November 19th to the appropriate county for a collection on their 2022 property tax statements.
Thank you. Any questions? I know this is one of the least favorite things we do. Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So you explained that during the summer, we referred people off to the county. We also had CARES Act money available for residents, citizens, homeowners, without any stipulation for what the money could be used for. We got some use of that money. We didn't really use all that was allotted. Is there any money left? Is it still available? I don't remember where we're at with that fund. And could that be suggested again? I mean, the county had money, but we also had money locally, so.
Ms. Heinecker.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Walsh, and Ann, correct me if I'm misstating this, but through the CARES funding, there was that specific package of funding that came down from the federal government. There were restrictions on use for cities to use it towards utility bills.
Really?
Yes, and Carrie's probably the best to be able to describe because she attended many of those webinars. But we did have other ways to assist, but the county had other programs through their federal funding that they were able to move forward, and I believe it had something to do with, because as those bills were being paid, the money then comes back. You know, we could overly compensate for utility bills. The money comes actually back to the city for the bills that we're assisting, so it's sort of giving money to the residents, and the residents are paying the money back to the city, and perhaps that's the mechanics of it, but nevertheless, that was the stipulation in that particular pot of money.
Okay.
So.
Thank you. Anybody else? Well, it is a public hearing, so technically I will open it up to the public, but I do not see anybody that wishes to speak on the issue. So I'll close it and bring it back to the council for action.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
So the only question I've got for Ms. Kisvater, just as a relation to the one address that was described, so if we pass the resolution as stated, that will move that to what staff is recommending and what the resident has requested.
Correct. Madam Mayor, Councilmember Jones, that would
Okay, so there's nothing
approve
needs
that.
to be done.
No.
With that, Madam Mayor, I'll move for approval of the resolution.
Second.
A motion and a second. Is there any for Councilmember Edberg?
Madam Mayor, thank you. So I'm just looking at the interest rate. It seems awfully high for the interest rate environment that we're in. 7.5% is certainly more than I can finance my car for. What gives there?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Edberg, that is the interest rate that has been used in all the past years. That's a great question, though. I can look back in our assessment. We have an assessment handbook and see how that was set and if we can change that.
Okay, so I'm not objecting to the idea that there should be an interest rate. And it may, in fact, not be material in the bigger scheme of things. The $30 processing charge is certainly going to be more consequential in terms of what these bills are actually going to look like. It just struck me as, we're borrowing more money at 1.5% or 2% when we bond. Now we've got the full faith and credit of our community in back of that, and a AA+ bond rating. But comparing that to 7.5 just struck me as do we need to rethink our policy or approach or update? And that might be where an appropriate place where this conversation should go, I think.
Thank you. Okay, so I have a motion. Do I have a second?
You do.
I did, okay. Now, any other further discussion on this? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. But I'm assuming you will look into that? Thank you. So moving on to 5B, Resolution Certifying Delinquent 2021 Miscellaneous Private Property Assessment for Recovery of City Expenses.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, this is another annual step that we go through. During the year, there are properties within the city that there are services that need to be done to the property. Their lawn care that isn't being taken care of, or if there's a tree that needs to be taken down. A lot of times it's a boulevard tree where the city pays half and the resident pays half of the money. If those, the city pays those up front so that we can have those services taken care of, and then we bill the property owners. So all of the property owners that were billed for their services, for their properties, of all of the invoices we sent out, there's not a lot of them, but of the ones that we sent out, there are 2 invoices that remain unpaid at this year. Similar to the utility billing payments, the city will accept payment on those invoices through November 19th. But if those 2 invoices aren't paid in that time, I'm forwarding a resolution to be able to certify these 2 invoices to the property taxes for those properties so that we can collect the amounts due to the city in the 2022 property tax statement.
Thank you. Council, any questions?
Move approval.
Oh, I'm sorry.
hearing,
you're right.
sorry.
I do have to have a public hearing, so I'm opening it up to the public. Seeing no one, I'm closing it to the public. No offense, but I know you're not speaking on this issue. So I will bring it back to the council. I have a
Move
motion
approval.
and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to 9A, resolution authorizing execution of an employment contract with the new city manager. You have the memo and the contract that was sent out in the packet from me. I think it's fairly self-explanatory, but if there are any questions, be happy to try and answer them for you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Does it, on the salary, it says initial performance review conducted. Who does that review?
Mayor.
Please. The council, I would assume, would do it.
assume, yeah.
Yes.
It's just not specific, I would assume that's the only one, is that?
Since that's
that
our own,
obvious?
since that's
Well,
our only
what-
employee.
Is it that obvious in the charter that it doesn't
Yeah.
need to be spelled out?
I think so.
Okay,
I
fine.
think it's pretty self-explanatory. 'Cause that's our only.
I know.
That's it. Okay, anyone else?
Move approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to 9B, resolution accepting a donation from the Lions Club for the Caboose renovation project. Ms. Heinecker.
Yeah, Mayor, members of the council, it just keeps rolling in. The
Yeah.
Lions Club are busy, so.
And generous.
Yeah, and very generous. So this, as you know, they've been very generous with contributions towards the All Abilities Park, and I think we're up to, what are we at there again now? About 250?
300,000.
300,000, thank you.
Yeah.
So 300,000 for that. And they now are donating an additional $20,000 to go toward the Caboose renovation project. The project itself, I can't speak to it as directly. I know that Rick Juba is the one that is staff assigned, has been working diligently with that committee. They have come up with some plans for
on that
some
one.
repairs to the Caboose, and that will be underway next spring, and there's still discussion about whether or not there'll be an additional kind of shelter for above the Caboose, and that conversation will continue into next year and come back to council at some point when there's a recommendation.
Councilman Bean's on that committee,
And Councilwoman Bean's on that committee, yes, so if you want to
graciously
speak to that.
accepted my invitation.
Yes. I don't know if Councilmember Bean had anything to add, but the donation is what we're asking for approval of, and maybe more information about the project he could share if the council's interested.
Well, this looks like a fairly easy one.
I have nothing to add. Rick Juba is doing a great job ushering this.
Would you like to make a motion to accept the money?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second? I have a second. Is there any further discussion? If not,
Yes.
Councilmember Jones.
I just got to make the point that someday, somehow, I mean, it's like the gazebo. I mean, if this was the Railroad Park gazebo, is there funds
There will be.
dedicated? All these things that are around that are kind of left off,
I think they're going and getting,
need to make sure. I mean, not that I don't appreciate this or what the private donor did. I just don't want to get,
Yep.
Ms. Heineck.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilmember Jones. And there will be, when the project comes to council, there will be a contribution also by the city for this
Right.
project. But
Understood.
yes, but for future years in terms of
should be
planning.
like
Yeah, it should
any
be
other
part of
building, any other
another
building.
park.
Right,
Yes.
right. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
It does?
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
I have a motion and I have a second. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to 9C, resolution scheduling a public hearing on the issuance of bonds and related capital improvement project. Ms. Kinfutter, this is your evening, huh?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, yes, it is. So the city is making progress, moving forward to the construction of the public safety facility project with approval of the construction document preparation at the city's council's last meeting. The city's financial management plan relies on the issuance of bonds for the project. One side note I want to add in here to answer a question that Councilmember Walsh had brought up at a previous meeting. We have been in contact with Senator Uyghur, and we will be working with him to create a bill to introduce in January seeking support of the project in the bonding bill. We've also been in confirmation with the MMB office to confirm that passing this resolution to set a maximum bond amount for the project does not preclude the city from receiving assistance through the state's bonding bill process. So
Excellent.
we are good to go with that.
So that's great for Senator Uyghur. Was Senator Chamberlain approached since it is actually in his Senate district?
Senator Uyghur's on the bonding. Senator Uyghur's
get
chair
that.
of the bonding committee.
Okay.
So-
More important, but I'd still want the support from the actual senator
Well, I
that's
wouldn't
from.
hold my breath.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Jones, I can say that the indication in correspondence with Senator Uyghur is that he believes that he will have the full support of all the representatives, including Representative Fisher. So
He'll get it, yeah, he'll do it.
Okay, Madam Mayor, members of the council, to continue to review the bonds that we would be issuing for this project are capital improvement bonds. This gives the city the ability to bond without having a citywide election. The approval of the bonds needs a 3/5 vote of the governing board. Public notice is given, so that's what we're looking for at this meeting. We're going to be passing a resolution to hold a public hearing on November 23rd. And because this bond does not need a citywide election, it is subject to the reverse referendum rules. So the public hearing would happen, if you approve that resolution, on November 23rd, and then that begins a 30-day period where a reverse referendum petition can be filed.
Well, there you go.
If no petition is filed, then the city can continue with the project and issue the bonds as planned. If a petition is received, the city council can choose to hold an election. They can seek alternative financing sources, or you can make a change to the project. To meet the planned schedule of the 22 construction date, the city is conducting the public hearing for the bond issuance at the same time that the construction documents are being prepared. So at this time, the council's resolution will set the maximum amount of the bond because we don't have the specific numbers for the project. The bond amount can be lowered in the future, so once we receive the bids on the project and then start working on the financing, the amount that you approve tonight is the maximum amount of the bonds that can be issued, but you can bring it down, so we're not tied to this maximum amount. So in figuring out, we needed to do a calculation of what those potential bonds would be. The calculation, we included the Wold Architects. The project estimated cost is $12.5 million. Given the instability in the market and the costs of materials or any unforeseen market issues, we added 7% of the cost just to make sure that there was enough. We've been working with Ehlers to prepare this information. They said it's better to err on a little bit higher side so that you can bring it down as opposed to having a lower amount and not being able to bring it up. We did add in $500,000 for any potential energy performance add-ons that were added on to the project over the next couple of months. So the total of all of those is roughly $13.9 million. The bond issue would be just over $14,300,000 by the time when you take those project costs, and then you have the cost of issuance, the capitalized interest, and the fees that get added into the project. So this, I'm going to note right here as I see this 14.3 million, that should be the number. There's a resolution that where on the back there's an attachment, which is the public hearing notice. In there, that 14.9 million number is incorrect. It should be the 14.3 million number. As we were working with Ehlers, they recommended that the city council consider a 20 or a 25-year bond issue. There is the option for a 30-year bond issue, but in that, the interest rates are higher. There's less bidders that are interested in 30-year bonds, so we would be limiting ourselves. So really the recommendation is to consider either a 20 or 25-year bond on that. So if we were to do a 20-year bond, the average annual bond payment would be $898,000. If there was a 25-year bond, the average payment over the life of the bond is $778,000. So the council doesn't need to make any decisions on the bond, the specifics of the bond issue. Right now, it's just looking at the approving that maximum amount. So what we're asking you to approve tonight is the resolution to advertise for a public hearing that would be on November 23rd, and that the maximum issue of the bond would be the $14,315,000.
Thank you. Questions? Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to make sure I've got the sequence in mind. So our action tonight would set a hearing for November 23rd. At the end of that hearing, the council would take action requiring a 3/5 majority to approve a bond of $14.3 million as the maximum amount. And that would begin a 30-day clock. If a sufficient petition, 5% of whoever turns out on November 2nd or whatever that date is, that would cause us to have to reconsider our financing, et cetera, et cetera. If nothing's received, then we have the full authorization to go ahead and issue the bonds sometime in 2022. Have I got that laid out? Okay.
Councilmember Bean.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The 5% petition, does that then require, what happens after that? Is there a vote required, or is this, how does that work?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Bean, if there is a petition that is signed by the registered voters of 5%, greater 5% of the voters in the election on November 2nd, then the petition would come to the city clerk, and then at that point, the city council would need to choose if they were going to hold an election for the voters to vote on the project, if the council would like to seek other financing options instead of the capital improvement bonds, or to abandon the project, I guess, at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's where we are, folks. So, thoughts, comments?
Another question, Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Bean.
What is the anticipated interest rate for the 20 or 25-year bonds?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Bean, right now we're looking at about 2.5%. It's higher than the interest rates that we've had on our other bonds because there's the 10 million bank qualified. Because our issue would be more than 10 million, then we wouldn't get, the banks wouldn't be qualified to bid on it, and so we wouldn't get the lower interest rate. So we'd be through this next couple of months as we'd be moving forward. We can work with Ellers and see if there's a way that we could break it into two different bonds that would keep us below that $10 million. It would be like an issue earlier in the year and an issue later in the year. But that all based on the calendar of when the expenses would need to be go out. So we don't know all of what the timeline is going to be at this point, so we can't determine that right now.
All right, thank you.
Madam Mayor, I'll move the resolution with the $14.3 million amount as the maximum.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to 9D, resolution approving 2022 union contract with the International Association of Firefighters, local number 5202. Ms. Heinecker.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So our assistant city manager has been quite busy, had success in settling 2 of the 3, and we're just waiting back for a final vote, I still think, with our Public Works union. So we're anticipating that to come back and be possibly on our next agenda. And all of them are fairly similar in what is being discussed, but with some nuances with each. The one that is before you is the proposed agreement for our firefighters and paramedics. And the change primarily with wages, that's what we look at initially, would be the 3% adjustment at the beginning of the year with a 1% adjustment mid-year. And that is an adjustment, that 1% mid-year is what we are looking at for and has been on the table and looking at for all of the unions. And we'd also be looking at that down the line for our non-union employees. We had different discussions at our work sessions about a 0.5% versus a 1% mid-year. Quite honestly, the budget consequences fairly de minimis, and it fits within what we propose for our preliminary tax levy, but it does help with our wage schedule that we continue to try to make it so that it remains competitive. So that is what we move forward for that piece of it. The other piece I think that would be of specific interest, and it's going to be consistent through all of these contracts, would be the insurance offer. So in the past few years, we've had an opportunity to offer 100% payment for any increase on the premiums. For this year, however, we negotiated a 75-25 split, so the city would cover 75% of that 9% increase, but employees would then be responsible for 25% of that increase, and that was accepted by this and the other unions. And there is no change in their HSA contributions that's being proposed at this time. Specific to this contract, there's a slight adjustment in accrued comp time, some refinement in language for callback, and then some compensation for shift leaders in the absence of their captains, their shift captains, which is a new position that council had approved some time ago. And with that, that is all I think that I think is worth bringing forward, or that is really on for changes for the firefighters contract. So with that, I ask council for consideration of the attached resolution and its approval.
Thank you. Any questions?
Move approval.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to resolution approving 2022 union contract with Minnesota Public Employees Association patrol officers. Ms. Heinecker.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. This will be more brief because it's very similar to what I described for the firefighter paramedics. So again, a one-year labor agreement. Insurance would be the same as described earlier, as well as the wage adjustments, 3% beginning of the year with a 1% mid-year adjustment. And then there's some language changes in a few of the provisions that's outlined. Certainly I can answer questions about that if you have any. And we also have some changes to the vacation accrual to make it same and similar to that which is provided to other city employees. So with that, if council has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I have a resolution for your consideration.
Thank you. Questions?
Move to approval. Second?
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to 9F, resolution providing benefits for employees of the city of White Bear Lake not covered by employment agreements. Ms. Heinecker.
Actually, Mayor, I'm going to just turn this over to Carrie. I think she has more she's going to add to this, so.
I wasn't reading.
Nope,
Sorry.
all good.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, quite a few of the details here are going to be similar to what City Manager Heidecker has just shared with the past two union contracts. I was going to add that the majority of the city staff are not covered by collective bargaining agreement. Therefore, the City Council establishes the compensation for these employees in the annual adoption of the position classification and compensation plan. The insurance benefits for these employees typically renew on January 1st to be consistent with the union employees that we do have. Since the council did approve Medica's insurance proposal at the last meeting, we are recommending the same insurance payment option as was just approved with the two unions. So it would be the city would pay for 75% of that premium increase and the employees would pay for 25%. There's no changes recommended for the health savings account, high deductible plan, or the deferred insurance benefit. So this resolution establishes the benefit package for the non-bargaining city employees for 2022.
Thank you. Council, any questions?
Move to approve, Madam Mayor.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to 9G, resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with Mcgrath Human Resources Group for a compensation study.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. We've had quite a bit of discussion, I think, at our work sessions about the need for us to do a compensation study. As we've discussed, the current classification and compensation plan was created in 1988, and it has served us very well over the years. We've been able to rely on that as we've had new positions added, and it's also pulled us through a lot of pay equity plans that we've needed to submit to the state every 3 years. However, as we've discussed, it's becoming more challenging as we hire new positions or as we have different positions that are either being promoted or changed within the city. The responsibilities have changed significantly over the past few decades, as you can imagine, especially as technology has evolved. And we also find ourselves needing to be certain that we are remaining competitive with cities of like size and similar services that are provided in their communities. With that, the decision and the conversation we had at least in the work session led us to looking into different firms that provide these services. There are really probably 3 primary firms in the metro area that do this. We looked more closely at 2 of them. The one that we were proposing, not only did they provide a plan that we felt was more comprehensive, we're impressed by some of the references that we've received most specifically and recently. The city of Northfield has been working with them, and we've had great conversation with their administrative staff about the process and how it's been unfolding. And then secondly, and importantly, they also were less expensive than the other consultants. So we are happy to report that our choice for a consultant for this work was also less expensive than the first. And I prior to the meeting, right before it started, I didn't have it in front of me. Maybe Carrie will recall, because she and I both reviewed what Rick had looked up, and I can't remember the cost of the other consultant, but I know that it was more.
I trust
yes.
you say it was.
So with that, any questions that you might have regarding the process or just discussion around the classification and compensation studies? Certainly we're happy to have that. Otherwise, we would recommend approval of the attached resolution.
Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Heinecker, I support doing it. How long would a study of this nature remain relevant to our, so we've gone through a period of time where relatively low rates of inflation, and that's characterized at least a good decade of the economy. And I get a sense that that's shifting. So from that perspective, how durable are the results of this type of work, and how would you picture us needing to monitor, adapt, reconsider again in X number of years? What do folks in your line of work think about this?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Edberg. So I'll add my thoughts on it, and I'm sure that Councilmember Bean probably has a few of his own, because sitting at the other side of the table during negotiations, I know that you've been in conversation with lots of cities who approach it very differently. And so I think, for us, because we haven't done it for so long, we really need to get deep into looking into how we define each of our positions and how we assign responsibilities to it relative to their comparable worth internally as an organization. And I think, so this first go at it, first time in decades, for us to be doing this, I think is going to be critical, I think, for a base for the city as it moves forward in the next decade or so. I think that in terms of looking at comparable wages, some cities do it every couple years. I think there's one, some cities have this regular, every 3 years they do a comp study. I don't know and I am not, this is not my, I don't know that's something that we would need to do every 3 years. I think that you can keep an eyeball on what's happening in other communities fairly consistently, but I think as long as we know that our base that we're operating from is current relative to how we are evaluating the positions internally and their relative merit for compensation. And that's something that we've been using the former plan and tweaking without strong basis. We don't have the it was Control Data's project back in 1988. We don't have that anymore. So we're using our best judgment based on how we view those positions at this time and relative to what they look like in the market, and it's been working for us. But it's difficult when you're negotiating, right, and you don't have this to fall back on. And also just for a sense of making sure that we're market-driven or market-based in our decisions.
So this study contains both an internal comparative purpose. Are we appropriately evaluating positions where we take into issues of gender and other factors? And then an external comparison, once we've identified what those are, comparing them to where the rest of our peer competitors might be. Okay, is there anything else that's in there that we should be thinking about?
I guess lastly and importantly, there's, very likely a budget impact, and we did talk about that in our work sessions, and that I think, we can't, I can't foretell what the conclusion of this will be. I suspect we have made some significant movement among some of our support staff, I'd say over the past 5 years, and also some of our midline staff. So I'm feeling fairly comfortable. I think there's one particular bargaining unit that there'll need to be some adjustments that has a broader impact because there's more employees within that bargaining unit. I can say that where there will be probably some feedback would be our higher level positions, our department head management level positions, and but there's only one person in each of those positions. So the impact, while it's a position, it's one person. And again, we'll see where that comes. And it isn't something, typically cities don't say, all right, here's what we're getting back and we're going to do this all next year. It's something that you look at and you work into over a course of time. So.
Councilmember Bean.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, my experience with the comparable worth studies is similar to a combination of what the city manager and Councilmember Edberg said. It is comparing the different jobs internally and externally. But a comparable worth study is very beneficial when you've got some positions that need to be adjusted more than other positions, and now you've got the evidence for it. So when it comes to utilizing arbitration to settle something, an arbitrator will pay heavy attention to a comparable worth study. My experience is that once you've established that, it's fine to go a decade before you do it again or more, because the jobs themselves don't change that much. I mean, they change eventually, but they don't change that much right away. You don't need to do the study over. You just need to use your comparisons to those outside agencies that were involved, and establish your salary increases based on those. And then another experience I have is if a large increase of some sort is required, perhaps that's phased in over several years rather than all at once. That's been a common occurrence. Or if we have a position that's overpaid, for instance, another way that can be handled at times is that person isn't affected by any salary freezes, but new employees to that position would experience the lower salary. So there's all sorts of different ways to work with that when you're implementing it.
Okay.
Okay. Any other? Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The phase that says, I'm trying to read so small, conduct external market survey specific to city positions. That's the really important part of this process. Is that public information? If you do you get on the phone, or obviously this vendor will get on the phone and call Shoreview and Roseville and say, send us your salary schedules? That's something that we share, that cities share? Is it public? How do they get that data?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Walsh. It is, and it's not as, because we also participate in, we're the recipients
get
of
asked,
those
right?
requests, right? And it's a slightly longer process because they have to ask specific questions about the positions themselves, because if you just give the straight salaries, sometimes their responsibilities are different and whatnot. But yes, to your point, it is something that we can get. It does require a little bit of prodding because it's not just like they can just send it to you. So when I say prodding, it requires cooperation from other communities to put the work into it on our behalf. But it's sort of a
That's
trade.
what we're paying for with this
Yes.
vendor, and they will get real data. It's
Yes,
not,
absolutely.
and it really is specific. I mean, they're going to stick to, because this really is apples to apples. It actually is easier than the private sector, I would say, because a police officer, a firefighter,
Correct.
an EMT, people in Paul's area, engineers. I got to believe the position descriptions line up pretty well. And so we're going to get real data and then the mid, high, low grid and everything. Okay.
Yes.
Anybody else?
Move approval. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to communications from the city manager.
Yes, Mayor. Members of the council, just a couple of quick things. One is we have two really great task forces that have been doing a lot of work this year. One would have been is the Housing Task Force, and the other is the Welcoming and Inclusive Community Task Force. I'm going to speak to the Welcoming and Inclusive Community Task Force, and I'll let Ann talk a little bit more about the Housing Task Force. But they're beginning to wrap up their work and are going to be having 2 meetings in November as the report is being assembled for council. So I just want you to know that continues, and doing some great work and having good conversations and outreach to the community. So more on that will be coming back to council. And then secondly, my only comment on the Housing Task Force would be that they're wrapping up the report, but it's significant in that we will be having an opportunity as a council to really dig into some of those findings at our work session. That's going to be our assigned topic at the November 16th work session, which is that Tuesday. So it's a reminder that we do have one scheduled for that evening at 6, and that will be our primary topic of conversation, would be to go through the findings of the task force. And then, of course, we will ask representatives of the task force to present it at a public meeting as well, so that the public can get a good sense of what the findings were. But this, by having it at the work session, you can dig in a bit deeper and spend more time on it than we would typically have at a council meeting. So those are the 2 announcements I had.
You have to talk about Kara's award and Greg's.
Oh, my goodness, yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, really big. So there are 2 things, yes, the mayor reminded me of, but, well, number one, and I think the council had received information about our city clerk completing her, she's going to get red right now, but she's, her work, her certification work, and the reason that we sent out information about her, I did, and the reason I'm bringing it up again now is really, it was a big commitment that Kara had undergone to complete her certification for that. So thank you, Kara. She's like,
She's ignoring
she's really good at her job. She keeps us all in the straight and narrow and makes sure that we're organized. So I just personally am grateful for everything that you always do. And then getting that is a big deal and kind of a cherry on the top of the ice
Will
cream.
that certification be part of the compensation stuff?
It just might be. It just might be.
No.
Yes.
I'm more afraid of her now.
Yeah.
Well, she anticipates what you need before you know you need it.
Yes.
That's
And secondly, I hope that the council had an opportunity to see, I don't know if it was via text or email, but that Chief Peterson received a very distinguishing award at the conference, the Fire Chief or Fire Officer of the Year Award, and for all of the great work he's been doing as our fire chief here at the City of White Bear Lake. He's really traveled or brought us through a lot on the past, it's only been 3 years really that we started our new model. 3.5 years since he's been hired, so very big honor, and really proud to work alongside him and be part of all of his work. So make sure that you got your message on that, and
Yeah, we did.
we let the press know, so
Bill
hopefully they'll-
Walsh, question, compensation package again.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. Line them up. Yeah. Thank you for the reminder.
Just
Yes,
didn't want to
those
make,
are important.
those are important things.
Yes, thank you. And
Well,
so, I
is
don't know
that
if
it?
either Paul or Ann had anything to add?
I just have one thing to add, just so council is aware, we have one last late season project that's going to hopefully start within the next week. The retaining wall or the boulder retaining wall at Memorial Beach will be a late season project just to kind of minimize damage and obviously interruptions to the beach. I think most folks are done using the
I
beach
think
for the
so.
year.
I think they're probably done.
So like everybody, contractors are busy, so that work should be starting here shortly, and we'll have that wrapped up before winter.
Hey,
And then I have just one quick note, a reminder, I think Ellen touched on everything about the Housing Task Force that was pertinent. And then just a reminder that this Thursday, Northeast Micah is holding its virtual bus tour. You received
like
an
a
invitation.
virtual bus tour, I love it.
And I'll be attending, but I will have to jump off early for a 10
I'll
o'clock
be
meeting.
attending.
But
I'll be on the bus.
I think the city will be well represented.
I'm trying to jump on it. I got to,
Great.
because I'd like to.
It's a good tour, it really is, very useful.
Can I ask
It's-
a weird question of staff, Madam Mayor?
Sure.
Not requiring, it's not.
As long as I don't have to answer it.
I've just been hearing Canadian geese are a problem. And I know I don't know if anybody else has been hearing of that too. I've been hearing it more. So just it's a question, because I know we had done something about it, probably it's been 8-9 years, but
We need a city Labrador, and I'll babysit it.
Babysit the dog.
anybody else is hearing anything?
You
It's
need a
just
border
nothing we
collie.
can do now.
Those,
Much activity.
there's border collies are good at, on golf courses, they use them to
To trail
shepherd the geese off. Yeah.
Coyotes that could serve that purpose.
Well, now that,
Georgia Fryer, she's heard her.
Yeah, I don't know that she did.
okay, well, with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Yeah, I have been. I keep on forgetting to bring it up. It's like the fourth time.
Do that.